So for many, many, many years, and actually, Wernicke himself actually proposed this idea initially. What kind of held sway in terms of our understanding of like the how the brain related to language comprehension and production was this thing called the connectionist model. And I just want to make it really clear, it's not does not hold sway anymore. Although actually, people do reference it quite a lot still. And the idea was that that you've got Wernicke's area, which is this posterior area in the temporal lobe, right? And it's linked by axons, by that big fasciculus, right? That big cable of axons that arcs around. So here's an example. This is Wernicke's area right here. This big cable of axons that arc around and work their way up into Broca's area and other regions in the frontal lobe. This big cable is called the arcuate fasciculus, and Norman Geschwind was a linguist and a researcher in the 60s who really did a lot of publications on this topic, but basically suggested that areas in more posterior regions, like in Wernicke's area, for example, he was quite explicit and said just Wernicke's area was involved in sort of comprehension of language, and then this information would be sent via the arcuate fasciculus to Broca's area for the programming of the specific utterance, and then you could have connections with the motor cortex to generate the particular patterns of output for the larynx, pharynx, tongue, face, etc., to generate for example, speech. Well, it turns out that this is too simplistic, but it held sway for a very long time. And one thing that they noted is that, for example, you would have other areas that were not Broca's and not Wernicke's, and you would be, if you had that damage, people would have pretty significant losses in terms of either language comprehension or production. And one of those areas is this region over here called the angular gyrus. And it turns out that the actual, connections between different regions is more complex than just, Wernicke's to Broca's. I mean, there's like from primary auditory cortex, which is indicated over here, you have projections to the angular gyrus, you have projections to this ventral temporal region along here. You can actually have pretty significant losses of language comprehension with damage in the angular gyrus and no damage to Wernicke's area at all. Or you can have significant loss of the ability to name things that you're looking at, for example, if you have damage to selective regions of this ventral temporal lobe. So what started to take sway is the sense that these networks were oversimplified. Clearly you would think actually that, something as complex and as, human and as essential as language is going to involve more than two regions, selected, connected by a single cable. But this was sort of the core of the language network that was identified, by Wernicke, following the work of Broca, and also expanded on a little bit by Norman Geschwind in the 60s. But today, our understanding is far more complex, and we're being helped along to a large extent by the advent of technologies that allow us to image, to see different areas of the brain in action when people are either comprehending or, generating speech or sign or writing.